On February 25, 2013, inside the United States Penitentiary at Canaan in Waymart, Pennsylvania, a young corrections officer was walking a housing unit alone. He carried a radio, handcuffs, and his keys. No weapon. He was 2 hours from the end of his shift. As he climbed a metal stairway, an inmate was waiting at the top. The inmate kicked him down the stairs and stabbed him to death, while more than 100 prisoners watched and did nothing. His name was Jessie Con-ui, known inside the federal prison system as Chino. He was already serving a life sentence for a murder he had committed in Arizona more than a decade earlier, and he was about 7 months away from being transferred to state custody to begin serving that sentence. He spent those 7 months killing a man who had nothing to do with any of it. How a man with nothing left to lose ended up stabbing a federal corrections officer more than 200 times over a cell search, and whether disrespect was actually the reason, is what this video is about. Before we get into this, drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Jessie Con-ui was born on January 17, 1977, in a slum in Manila, Philippines. His mother married a United States serviceman, and around 1986, the family moved to Rome, New York. He was about 9 years old. Then they moved to Arizona, which is where everything that followed took shape. The Arizona juvenile justice system was, at that point in time, under direct federal court oversight because of documented failures in how it treated the young people in its custody. Inadequate services, inadequate care, inadequate intervention. The jury that would eventually hear Con-ui's federal murder case found formally that the system had done nothing to address his problems before releasing him. That is not a defense. It is a fact about what was and was not available to him at the one point in his life when the system had a real opportunity to change the direction of things. It did not change anything. By 1995, at 18, Con-ui was entering the adult prison system for the first time, convicted for stealing cars. He served around 5 years. At 5 feet 9 inches tall and 140 pounds, he was not physically imposing. He did not need to be. What he had learned by the time he came out was something more useful than size. He had learned who ran the prison system in the Southwest, and he had decided which side of that he wanted to be on. The New Mexican Mafia is a prison gang out of Arizona, distinct from the Mexican Mafia's California operation, though sharing the same cultural code. Court records describe Con-ui's eventual role within it as gang assassin, the person leadership calls when someone needs to be removed and the order needs to be carried out cleanly. On August 25, 2002, in the eastern part of Phoenix, Arizona, Con-ui demonstrated what that role looked like in practice. The target was a man named Carlos Garcia, a fellow member of the gang, and someone Con-ui knew well. Con-ui contacted Garcia and arranged to meet him at a laundromat in Phoenix. When Garcia arrived, 2 men ambushed him and opened fire. Garcia was hit, but managed to get out of the immediate area. One of the men who had shot him followed. He caught up to Garcia and fired 4 rounds into his head. Garcia died there on the street. The case was later described in court filings as a gang initiation killing, Con-ui's way of proving to the people above him that he could be relied on. It took 6 years for the case to come together. In June of 2008, Con-ui stood before the Maricopa County Superior Court in Phoenix and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, along with money laundering and theft. The sentence was life in prison, with a mandatory minimum of 25 years before any other consideration was possible. He was 31 years old. By that point, he had also been federally sentenced for something separate. In June of 2003, Con-ui had been arrested for his role in the New Mexican Mafia's cocaine operation, conspiracy to possess more than 5 kilograms with intent to distribute. Government filings from that period also noted, as an allegation, that he had been involved in planning to kill the detectives who were investigating him. That alleged plot was never prosecuted. It is documented in government papers as an allegation. and that is how it should be treated. In 2005, a federal court in Phoenix sentenced him to 11 years for the drug case. Both sentences ran concurrently. He would finish the federal time first, and then transfer to Arizona, where his gang classification would put him in 23-hour isolation for the rest of his natural life. Before any of that happened, there was the matter of how he conducted himself while still inside the federal system. On November 21, 2010, at the United States Penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana, Con-ui attacked a fellow inmate named Joshua Parks and stabbed him with a homemade knife. When a discipline hearing officer asked why, Con-ui said, "It was one of those days." The incident generated a disciplinary record. No criminal charges were filed. He also, at some point during his incarceration, attacked another inmate with a metal food tray. That too was handled as an internal matter. Con-ui arrived at USP Canaan in 2009. In March of 2012, he committed a significant rules violation, and a discipline hearing officer ordered 6 months in the special housing unit, solitary confinement, 23 hours a day. The order was suspended almost immediately. He was returned to general population on the condition that he behave. In September of 2012, he committed another significant violation. The same thing happened. 6 months in solitary, ordered, and then suspended. He was returned to general population again. 2 orders for solitary confinement, both walked back within the same year, is not a disciplinary record. It is paperwork. A corrections expert, who later reviewed the records, said that after the second violation, Con-ui should have been moved to restricted housing at a minimum, that the anger he would display after the cell search 7 months later was predictable, and that anyone looking at his file should have seen it coming. The facility sent him back to general population anyway, both times. Officers who worked alongside Con-ui at Canaan described him, in the aftermath of the murder, as someone who had never given them problems. One called him the last person he would have expected to attack staff. These were the same people who had let the solitary confinement orders lapse twice in the span of 12 months. What they were describing was not the absence of warning signs. It was the absence of anyone reading them correctly. Less than 48 hours before February 25, 2013, Corrections Officer Eric Williams caught Con-ui smoking a cigarette in his cell. Contraband. Williams told him he would be searching the cell regularly as a consequence. The next day, Williams followed through. He sent 2 officers to conduct the search. Con-ui described what happened to a prison psychologist the following day in a recorded evaluation. The officers, he said, had torn his cell apart. His belongings were on the floor. His food was on the floor. Everything he owned in that cell was scattered across the concrete. In a federal prison, your cell is the only space you control. For someone who had spent his adult life inside institutions where status and standing were the only currencies that mattered, being subjected to that, by a guard in front of other inmates, in the one space that was his, registered differently than it would have anywhere else. That evening, Con-ui made 2 shanks from materials available to him in general population and sharpened them. Williams was 34. He had grown up in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania, studied criminal justice at King's College, and worked his way through supermarket security and small-town policing before joining the Bureau of Prisons. The date he started there was September 11, 2011. He was single. He had just bought a cottage near Lily Lake and was renovating it himself. His younger sister Lauren talked to him almost every day. According to her, he loved comedy and had a joke for everything. He had also told her more than once that the work at USP Canaan was sometimes kind of boring. On the night of February 25, 2013, Williams was working the final 2 hours of his shift in a high-security housing unit at the prison. Like every officer in his position, he was supervising over 100 inmates alone, unarmed. The kick that started the attack, the one Williams did not see coming, sent him from the top of the metal stairway to the floor at its base. What followed lasted approximately 11 minutes, and all of it was captured on the prison's surveillance cameras. He stabbed Williams 203 times. He kicked him 11 times. He stomped on his head, neck, and face 6 times. At one point, he lifted the body off the floor and slammed it against the concrete. The footage would later be played in a federal courtroom in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Williams's parents were in the courtroom for opening statements. They left before the video played. They said they did not want to see their son that way. Dr. Gary Ross, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy the following morning, testified about what he found. One stab wound had gone through Williams's left eye, another through his right hand, another through his left ear. The skull was fractured in multiple places. In Ross's words, it was the repeated blunt force stomping that caused Williams's death. Not a single blow, but the accumulation of them, over and over, while the victim was already on the ground. Partway through, Con-ui cut his own hand on one of the shanks. The grip had become slippery. He stopped. He walked to a shower area nearby, washed the cut, and went back. At another point he paused, propped his foot on a table a few feet from where Williams was dying, and accepted a drink from one of the other inmates in the unit. He sipped it, then went back. At another point still, he stopped, reached into Williams's pocket, and found a piece of gum. He unwrapped it, put it in his mouth, and kept going. More than 100 inmates were in that housing unit during those 11 minutes. Not one of them intervened. At least one of them passed him a drink. Another corrections officer eventually came through and found Williams. Officers followed the blood across the floor, checking cell by cell until they reached Con-ui. A single drop of blood on his person confirmed what the trail had already suggested. Other officers restrained him and took the shanks. When one of them asked why he had killed Williams, Con-ui said, "That fool disrespected me." As he was being walked out of the unit, he told another officer he was sorry, but he had to do what he had to do. "I am sick of all your people's disrespect." Eric Williams was 34 years old. He was the 25th federal corrections officer killed in the line of duty since 1901. There is one other theory about what happened that night, offered by a former inmate who was present in the housing unit. He told the Times leader that, in his view, Con-ui killed Williams not over disrespect, but because he did not want to be transferred to Arizona. In the federal system, Con-ui had been living in general population. Arizona's state system would have put him in 23-hour isolation for the rest of his life because of his gang status. He was 7 months from that transfer. Killing a corrections officer would keep him in the federal system indefinitely. The former inmate was clear that this was his own interpretation, not something Con-ui had ever said to him. Con-ui himself, speaking to the prison psychologist the day after the murder, said he had swallowed a lot of Williams's disrespect and could not tolerate any more of it. He also said he may have overreacted. Con-ui was indicted on June 25, 2013. His trial did not begin until June 5, 2017, nearly 4.5 years later, at the federal courthouse in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Senior United States District Judge A. Richard Caputo presided. From the first day, the trial had an unusual shape. Assistant United States Attorney Francis Sempa opened for the government. Eric Williams was 2 hours from shift end and going home, he told the jury. Then, Con-ui's defense team stood up and delivered their own opening, with one sentence: "Jessie is guilty of murder beyond all doubt." They would not contest the evidence, would not call witnesses during the guilt phase, and would not challenge the government's case. They were there for the penalty phase, and only for the penalty phase. The only question they cared about was whether their client would be executed. During the guilt phase, one of Williams's fellow officers broke down on the stand, describing the scene. "He was mutilated, my friend, co-worker, and brother," he told the jury. "I couldn't recognize him." On June 7, 2017, after roughly 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Con-ui guilty on all counts. The penalty phase ran for several weeks. Sempa presented the aggravating factors: The victim was a federal officer performing his duties. The killing was premeditated. It was carried out in an especially cruel manner, and Con-ui had a prior murder conviction. The defense laid out its mitigating case: the slum in Manila, a stepfather in Arizona who sometimes locked him in his room, the poverty, the domestic violence, and the juvenile justice system that, in the jury's own finding during those same proceedings, had done nothing to address his problems. Lauren Williams, Eric's younger sister, testified toward the end of the penalty phase. She was pregnant, with her baby due on August 10th. Her son's name was going to be Oliver Eric Williams. And Eric, she said, would be his guardian angel now. Con-ui was permitted to address the jury before sentencing. He apologized for the suffering he had caused. He said he wished he could take it back. He said he could not explain why he had done it, which contradicted, almost word for word, what he had said to the officers walking him out of that housing unit 4 years earlier. Deliberations over the sentence began on July 10, 2017. The first vote in the jury room produced 2 holdouts. Over the course of 5 hours, one of them changed their mind. The other did not. The holdout was the foreperson of the jury. She told the other jurors she could not vote for death. She also disclosed that her own son was in prison. Juror number 7, Amy Weidlich of Wilkes-Barre, described the deliberations in an interview the following day. The foreperson, she said, kept repeating the same thing. "I just feel bad for Jessie's mother." When Weidlich pressed further, the foreperson said, "We can't bring Eric back. There's enough bad things in the world the way it is, and I can't see taking a life." Weidlich asked her directly whether she could face Don and Jean Williams and tell them their son's murder would go without the sentence prosecutors had asked for. The foreperson did not change her answer. Federal law requires a unanimous jury to impose a death sentence. When unanimity is not reached, the sentence becomes life in prison without the possibility of parole. There is no middle ground, no judicial discretion, no path to a different outcome. 11 out of 12 is not enough. The sentence was formally imposed on October 12, 2017. Don Williams had described receiving the news on the morning of February 26, 2013, this way. "The thing every parent fears is some kind of knock on the door in the middle of the night." It happened. 4 years later, after the sentencing, he spoke again. "This man was already serving life in prison," he said. "He killed my son, and they gave him another life sentence. Do you know what they did to punish him for taking my son's life?"
You know what they did to him for doing what he did to my boy? They did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. So I'm not happy. It's not right.
Justice wasn't done here today.
No, it was not.
Jessie Con-ui is currently held at the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Fremont County, Colorado, ADX Florence, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. He is in solitary confinement. His Bureau of Prisons number is 04287-748. The Eric Williams Correctional Officers Protection Act was signed into law by President Obama on May 9, 2016, a year before the trial, 3 years after the murder. Pennsylvania Senators Pat Toomey and Bob Casey introduced it, working alongside Don and Jean Williams. The law requires the Bureau of Prisons to issue pepper spray to officers in medium security, high security, and administrative facilities. A corrections officer walking a housing unit alone at night now has a tool that Eric Williams did not have. In May of 2023, Pennsylvania representatives introduced Eric's Law, which would let prosecutors seat a second jury for sentencing when the first cannot agree on death. The bill came directly out of this case. It has not yet become law. There is a version of this story where the life sentence stops someone, where knowing you will never walk free again makes the idea of killing anyone in that building not worth what it might gain you. That version is tidier and more reassuring than this one. The sentence did not stop him. The documented history of violence in his file did not stop him. The 2 orders to remove him from general population did not stop him, because both were quietly reversed before they could do anything. What finally contained him was a cell at ADX Florence, conditions designed to eliminate almost all human contact. Whether that is the harshest outcome the system could produce, or simply the only outcome that made practical sense given everything that had already been tried, depends on how you want to look at it. He told the psychologist he had overreacted. He told the jury he could not explain himself. He told the officers that night he was sick of being disrespected. Whether any of those statements is the real answer, or whether the man watching a calendar count down to Arizona had already made a different kind of calculation, is a question nobody in that courtroom was able to settle. The words he used are not unusual words. Disrespect. Can't take it anymore. Had to do what I had to do. People say those words every day, in schools and parking lots and on street corners, without having done anything yet that cannot be undone. Most of the time, nothing comes of it. Occasionally, it goes somewhere it cannot come back from. The distance between those 2 outcomes is not always as wide as it looks from the outside. And some of the people who will find that out the hard way are watching a video right now. If this story made you stop and think, hit the like button. That is how YouTube decides to show this to more young people who might be hearing the wrong voices right now. Drop your city in the comments. Every comment tells the algorithm this story matters. And if you are watching on your phone, hit the hype button below the video. Hype only works on mobile, and it is the fastest way to get this in front of someone who needs to hear it before they make a decision they cannot take back.